Good afternoon, everyone. We are excited to have you here with us today for the Focus on Family and Disability seminar. Uh, Today is a wonderful day. I'm glad that all of you walked through the cold to get here because I know parking is not easy on campus. If you're not in the building, then you may have had a trek if you came from anywhere other than campus. So thank you all for coming. If you don't know already, the restrooms are located, the ladies' room to the right of the elevator, and the men's room is to the left. This is the second year of the Focus on Family and Disability seminar series, and uh, we at the Family Support Program offer this series to families, students, communities, and providers. And we are really excited to have you here. So today, we have a wonderful panel prepared for you. And normally I would be facilitating, but I'm not. Today, Ashley Wren, who is our MSW intern at Family Support Program, will be facilitating today's panel discussion. So I'm going to turn things over to Ashley, and we'll get started. Ashley?
Hey everybody. So today's topic is post-secondary options, education, employment, and independent living for transition to adulthood. So this is becoming a more and more important topic as we see more and more the benefits of a positive transition plan and programs that help youth transition. So just a general overview for people who maybe aren't as familiar. Transitioning period is a very important time. It's very exciting. You can have educational opportunities, employment opportunities, training programs, social outings, and independent living. But for youth that have special needs, which includes intellectual and developmental disabilities, physical disabilities, and mental health issues, this can be a time of fear and confusion on top of that excitement. So, and often families and youth don't have the resources, information, and support they need to be able to come up with a transition plan that will help their youth be successful and independent. Current research states that these youth are not as engaged socially as their peers. They also have disproportionate education and employment outcomes. For instance, the U.S. Department of Labor finds that only 27% of these youth are employed compared to 70% of their peers. Research also finds that for youth that are able to transition well, that they improves their health and their overall well-being. So this makes it crucially important to understand what's out there that could help them, what helps outcomes, what is important. And also, if you need more information, we have a topical brief on our website, which is fsp.unc.edu. It has a lot of the concrete, up-to-date information. So today's panel, which are all awesome, they come with a whole host of experience and expertise around this topic. They come from self-advocacy, transition planning, education and employment, and life skills development. So today's panel includes two self-advocates, Keneth, Kelty, and Kenmon. And we also have three people that work directly with transition programs and educational programs. These are Deb Zuver, Julie Bailey, and Susan Lombardo. So I'm now going to introduce each of them to individually to have about 5 to 7 minutes to talk about what they do, how they got involved with the work, what brought them to it, and what programs they work with. So first up is Keneth Kelty.
Yes, hello, I am Kenneth Kelty. I am a motivational post speaker. My experience of autism and includes on a college campus. I am a recent college graduate of the Western Carolina University Participants Program, and I am currently a LEND trainee in advocacy and hope to have more leadership roles in the self-advocacy discipline.
Second up is McCafferty Kenmon.
I am a third-year Lind Fellow, and all of these words we're throwing out might not make a lot of sense yet. So I'm going to let Deb clarify some of that, because it's a program that Kenneth and I are both involved in. As far as the field of self-advocacy, I like to say I'm late to the party because I was diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum as in middle-aged. As an adult, I teach. So within a span of a year, I was diagnosed and then became a LIN trainee. See, now I had this all nice and good in my head. So I think that I have an interesting perspective because I haven't been through the background of the programs that a lot of the things that we're focusing on deal with. I just sort of came in from the side. The opportunity to be in a part of the LIND program was tremendous, and I was offered a second year as a trainee. And when I became the education coach for our other self-advocate trainee that year. Now I'm in my third year. My role has expanded. I am still the education coach for we have 2 self-advocate trainees this year. I am also involved with educational opportunities across the state with the Post-Secondary Education Alliance, Project STIR. I'm involved with recruiting our self-advocates for next year and just in general making connections between our program and the community so that we can further everyone's knowledge of what's going on. I think this is a very exciting opportunity. I think I'm constantly amazed at how many people really have no idea of what's going on with post-secondary education options. And I think this will be a very good panel.
Next up is Susan Lombardo.
Thank you, Ashley. Barbara, thank you for inviting me to be part of the panel. I currently work at East Chapel Hill High School. I'm employed as a transition facilitator, and that means that I'm in the thick of it with our students and their families. It's really a role of privilege, and it's one that I really, really enjoy. I have a background in rehabilitation counseling and have served people with disabilities for many years, as you can tell, maybe. And I have been with the school system for 11 years now. I serve our students with more significant disabilities in our occupational course of study program and our system level classrooms. And my role has multiple dimensions. I think what's most critical are the partnerships that I develop with our families on behalf of our students, partnerships with our community to ensure good collaboration, and certainly working closely with school folks, and that could be teachers and administrators, our bus drivers, and then when I talk about the community, in addition to adult service providers, it's also our employers. So it's really, and I know it's kind of a tired phrase, but it really is a village that comes together with a common goal, and helping to identify that goal and bring everyone in to make that happen is just, it's a remarkable process. And it's filled with lots of energy and excitement and creativity. and belief. So transition starts with that attitude that that's what's going to happen.
Next up is Julie Bailey.
Hi, everybody. I'm Julie Bailey, and first I want to say Happy Chinese New Year. Yesterday was the New Year. I was fortunate to celebrate it last night with 30 of my closest friends and friends of friends and friends of friends eating out. And I find it so ironic that this is the year of the monkey. And anybody that's been paying attention to our presidential campaign, you're probably sitting there wondering, how did the Chinese know thousands of years ago that we would have this arena today? But we do, and we're all trying to survive and navigate all of the issues at hand. And our transitioning services for special needs young adults is part of that. I really encourage you in your journey to ask those important questions of anyone running for public office. What's your stand? Where do you see the gaps? How are we going to find the funding? Where are the partnerships? How do we help people collaborate? How do we support a community? What's the cost on the community? What's the cost on the family and the individual that has the disability? And one of the opportunities you're going to have is coming up March 19th. I hope you saw the flyer out there for the legislative breakfast on mental health. There's about 300 to 400 people at this event annually. This year, the title is Breaking the Mental Health Pipeline to Prison, which is all-encompassing. It starts at a very young age, and if we are not working together as a community to support our young adults with special needs, they get into the criminal justice system, and it's very hard to get them out. So we're going to be talking about that March 19th, and I hope that you will come. Now, that said, I am here today because of my journey with mental health. It started about 20 years ago when my husband and I adopted a sibling group out of foster care, 3 brothers, who within 24 hours of them being in our home, we realized that they had mental illness. So for the first 5 years of trying to navigate this maze of services and beating our heads against the wall a lot, I ran into this system called OPC at the time, the area program, which began offering treatment to my children. And as a result of maybe my anger and my frustration and my being very vocal about it and me just not letting go of what my children needed, they asked me to start a family program and to work and mentor other families and teach them how to navigate the system, much like my husband and I had to navigate the system. And then through this process, I was introduced very early on to Barbara Leach, who was one of my mentors and trainers 16 years ago. I learned so much from Barbara that it's kept me going today. As Susan said, it does take a village to raise a child. And I hear people use that term without meaning or with insincerity. They think it's overused. And the people who say that to me, that they're really sick of hearing that phrase, and believe me, I've had plenty of people say that, are not parents of special needs children. Interesting. And I have said for many years that whichever governor is in power in the state of North Carolina who is signing off on cutting all of these funds to community programs across the state of North Carolina and to Department of Health and Human Services, take one of my kids for 2 weeks, and I think that will change your ideas on how you want to fund the system. My kids are wonderful. We got them when they were 4, 7, and 8 years old, and tonight my middle child is celebrating his 27th birthday, and our kids have struggled for 20 years that we've been their parents. They have struggled. The system is not kind. And it's not just the treatment system. Our public school system puts up barriers and the barriers come from people who are truly well-intentioned, but they don't live with a childlike mind, so they don't understand the issues. And I used to say it all the time when I went to IEP meetings, just shake my head when a teacher would say to me, well, if you would just make him do his homework, we wouldn't have this problem. I think, well, if you were sitting at that table with one of my kids for 3 hours doing the same problem and getting nowhere other than a child who would start hitting the wall or beating their head against the wall, literally, putting a fist through a door, having complete meltdowns, there would be a point where you would say, it's okay, honey, you don't have to do this homework. And for parents like me, that was a nightly routine. And you have to learn how to advocate for your child to get those special compensations written into the IEP and make sure that the school follows it. So that was my role early on, is just learning how to be a strong advocate, the best advocate I could possibly be for my child. And when I started the Family Advocacy Network with Mental Health America of the Triangle, that was my job in the community, teaching other parents how to help their child and how to be the best advocate they could possibly be. Well, along this journey, when our oldest son turned 18, up until that time, because he was adopted, he had Medicaid. That was dropped on his 18th birthday, and our private insurance would only pay if he would go to college, and he dropped out of college. So he had no health care, and we did not have the financial resources to pay for him to stay in therapy and to get his medications. So we had to pound the pavement in a totally new way, from raising a young child and an adolescent. Now we're raising an adult, and the worlds are different. The minute you turn 18, the world changes. And we had to learn a whole new system at that point and find ways to go in the back door to get him therapy and to get his medications paid for. And we were somewhat successful. Sadly, during this time, he turned to substance abuse and got in with some wrong people. And in July of 2008, he was murdered. And it took us 4.5 years to get to the first trial because there were so many people involved. Our frustration and our pain, we looked at what led to this. And we could identify gaps in services in the community and in the treatment system. And my husband and I wanted to address those problems because we don't want any other parent going through what we've had to go through. So we started a foundation called Josh's Hope in 2009, and it's very narrow focused on working with young adults ages 18 to 35 who have some kind of mental health condition and who are not employable otherwise. They aren't successful in post-secondary education. They need training in something. They can't stay employed. They are probably on rocky housing, like couch surfing with friends, or still living at home. So the program was designed to help this population. One of our frustrations for Josh, he was in a great program in our community called Kermon, and he was there for about 3 months, and he had a manic cycle, left the property, didn't show up for curfew, and a few days later, when he decided he was ready to go back, the administrator said, well, he no longer meets our criteria. So we felt like he was being punished for having the symptoms of his disease. And we created Josh's Hope as being a very forgiving program. The students who come through are trained in woodworking. It is supported. We have a vendor contract with the state of North Carolina Vocational Rehab Services, which pays for students to come through the program. When they finish, we find them employment. If they become homeless or are homeless when they come in, we help them secure housing. We get them jobs when they're finished. They go through independent life skills. And while they're there, we have a clinician on staff, and they get weekly individual therapy and group therapy. So we've created a program that is what we call wraparound supported. And My other two sons are actually employed there. They have finished the program. And I was talking to somebody earlier. For some of us parents, when our children are not succeeding in the community, the best way we can help them is to create something that employs them and keep teaching them those skills so that they can one day live independently, safely, and successfully.
And finally, Deb Zuver.
Thank you. Well, it's wonderful to be here, and the focus on transition is so important, as everyone has been saying. And I think about collaboration that really everyone has mentioned. And along with Chinese New Year, this is Mardi Gras. So I will wish you a happy Mardi Gras. And that brings to mind the resiliency and the collaboration and a vision of the future that the city of New Orleans has and that has been an inspiration. And so I think, when I think of people working together and having high expectations, which I think is really relates to everything transition, so that can be another inspiration. So I'm at the Carolina Institute for Developmental Disabilities. We're part of the med school here at UNC. And the CIDD is the designated University Center for Excellence in DD. So every state has got one of these. We're it for North Carolina. And so our focus is research, education, training. We work on policy. We do innovative kinds of things and really serve the state of North Carolina. So one of the things I'm involved with, I direct advocacy projects and initiatives there. And one of the things I've been involved with for many years is Project STIR, and that stands for Steps Toward Independence and Responsibility. And we're an inclusive team of trainers. In fact, Barbara has trained with us a number of times. Keneth has been involved in our training. So well, you have too, actually, yeah. Share the opportunity there. So the focus is hands-on training in advocacy and leadership for people with intellectual and other developmental disabilities. And we have trained locally across the state, and we've also trained leadership teams in Maryland, Ohio, Missouri, and some other states. So that's a big focus of ours. So one of the other acronyms that was mentioned is LEND, and LEND stands for Leadership Education in Neurodevelopmental Disabilities. And so some of you are involved in LEND, who I see here. And what that is, it's a program that's funded by the U.S. Maternal and Child Health Bureau. So this MCH funding allows us to recruit a cohort of trainees from all different disciplines. So it's graduate level trainees in psych, occupational therapy, physical therapy, audiology, social work certainly is a part of that, special ed, psychology, what did I leave out? There's about 10 or more disciplines. Well, one of the disciplines that we felt was really important to include is the discipline of advocacy. So we recruit people with expertise in advocacy, and that's self-advocates who have a background and an interest and an expertise in self-advocacy. And so, as you heard earlier, Keneth is one of our self-advocate LEND trainees this year, and McCafferty is a fellow this year and has been with us and developed a lot of new, they're really pioneers in this. And the CIDD has been a national leader in starting this, and we're trying to support other LENDs to do the same thing because we truly believe in inclusion, not as kind of a nice thing to do, but because diversity is what enriches our communities. It's a two-way street. It's not something that's a charitable approach. It's actually fulfilling the mission of UNC, because UNC is about diversity and expanding opportunities for North Carolinians. So we really see ourselves as a part of that. So one of the other things that I'm involved with is a team of us, and everything, you know, like you said, collaboration. Again, I go back to that. Everything I'm talking about, it's a team of people coming together to make this successful. We launched the North Carolina Post-Secondary Education Alliance, and that is a group. Now we've got about 90 people, and it's stakeholders from across the state. It's youths, it's self-advocates, it's educators, agency folks, some legislators, certainly families, and some graduates of post-secondary opportunities that meet the learning needs of students with intellectual developmental disabilities. So we're very excited as new opportunities across North Carolina continue to emerge and grow. And we've had a couple of national demonstration sites here in North Carolina. Western Carolina is one of those, and I know Kenneth is going to share some of that in a little while, because they have an amazing opportunity there. And App State has just been designated this model demonstration site for the next 5 years. What else did I want to mention? So as a part of that effort to expand opportunities, we also were working on shifting policy, on systems change, kinds of needs, and so there's a lot to do, and having that kind of commitment from such a diverse group of people has made a big difference over the years. So we've been going for about 6 years now. So what else did I want to? Well, my background is I'm a licensed family therapist, and I worked in special ed and in mental health, and just in educational and clinical settings, a variety of those over the years. But I've been working in transition now for probably more than 15 years. And it's really where a lot of these issues come together. And certainly that mantra of nothing about us without us, we try to really live that at the CIDD, because we see it as something that it's a social justice issue. It's something it's a human rights issue, and it's very much a part of what we do there. So. Oh, and I will mention that I might be talking about resources. A number of us will be. There's a little sign-up sheet that's on the registration table. So I don't know if you got a chance to write your name, but I can email out some links and things if you're interested.
Now I'm going to pose some questions under 3 broad categories for our panelists. They are transition planning, life skills development, and self-advocacy. After each section, we'll have about a few minutes for people to ask questions, but we will also have about a 15-minute question and answer session at the end as well. So if at any point you would like to ask a question of our group, feel free to do so. First, with transition planning, the first question I like to ask is, when beginning the process of planning a transition, what are some of the most important things to consider, and when should a family start this process?
Do you have anybody in mind, or does it matter? Doesn't matter. I'm happy to start that. It's never too early to start transition planning. When your child is born, a lot of you may set up a trust fund, or you might plan for some financial security or college fund for them. So you are thinking transitionally. You are making a plan for them to grow up and move out of the house and celebrate with champagne when you become an empty nester. But I think in our public school system, we really start thinking about it around age 14 to 16. And for our kids who have IEPs, we have vocational rehab services that can be in place starting at, is it 16, Susan?
Generally, yeah.
Yeah, around age 16. So even in the public school setting, there is support to start planning that transition. I will tell you now that that system fails miserably. It is not regimented like in a way that I have personally found to be very helpful. For the past 16 years, I've worked with families and attended hundreds of IEP meetings over the years and helped them in the transition process. And the thing I always find interesting is we call it an individualized education plan, but it's a standardized form, and there's only so much they can do with that. You can be really creative if you know how to advocate for it, but a lot of parents get caught off guard and they don't know the right questions to ask, so they get regimented and standardized into a transition plan. So I encourage the families I've worked with to be creative. What's the real goal? I mean, you've got to sit down with your child and ask them, how do you envision your future? What do you want to do after high school? Some of our children may not be on a 4-year graduation plan. They might be on a 5 or a 6-year graduation plan. And those are all things to discuss with your child and with your team at school. But you've got to start early and you've got to involve the child. You can't make the child's plan according to your dream for that child because you're setting everybody up for failure and disappointment.
Yes. Well, I would say it would be a good thing to start them at a young age. Is when I was very little at a young age, I went to my IEP meetings at a very young age. Might not have always advocated, but it helped better prepare me. Because of Western Carolina, since the parents cannot advocate, there was a PCP meeting, which stands for Person-Centered Planning, and going to IEP meetings at a young age helped prepare me to advocate for myself, and also too with the self-determination pieces. At a young age, being involved in inclusive camps and after-school programs, and in a youth group at the United Methodist Church of the Palm Beaches really helped prepare me for transitioning and for more self-determination.
So you were doing that at a pretty young age, weren't you?
Yes.
The camps and things?
Yes, the camps and being involved in the Early Childhood Academy at Lake Worth Community High School. And for your course a little bit, the Early Childhood Academy was a college entry level kind of class setting that helped me out. They were very inclusive.
I think about transition planning as being a lifeline to adulthood. And parental involvement as early as possible, and though it's not a comfortable place to be in for many of our parents. There's a lot of grief, there's a lot of sorrow. It's a painful place to start thinking about the future. Yet parental involvement in this process is really the most significant factor in the transition outcomes for our students with disabilities. I think it's an involvement that means informed knowledge. And so as we begin this process, it's important for families to know that there's information that they need to have. And the more information they have, they're in a better place then to begin thinking about their child and thinking about what can happen for them. When I meet with families, I always try to think and talk about what their child can do. I know there's a lot of emphasis in the schools about functional limitations, disabilities, accommodations, and I'd like to bring in a different dimension, a different picture for them, for their child, and what that can look like once they leave high school. 14 in this state is the year that the student must have a secondary transition plan, which is a component of the IEP. I think it really starts to get fleshed out, though, in high school. Recently, I was approached by a teacher in one of the middle schools, and I'm kind of excited about this. She said, we need to start doing something real intentional in our school for our students with disabilities, and these are all my ideas, and can we come together and talk about it? So I have a lot of hope And I never lose hope. It's really an attitude. I think that if you get into the dark places, then you're really oppressed in your creativity, in the way you think, in your innovativeness. Um, and I think that's really a crucial piece in this process. And bringing our families in with that kind of attitude, that kind of outlook is so important.
I want to add something that Kenneth made me think of is um, each school district can be different from the next school district. So the services that he experienced at his school may not be available at the neighboring school district. And also there's a big, big gap in what is offered for the different types of disabilities. If you have a physical limitation or developmental disability, there are more services available in the public school setting than a child who has a diagnosed mental illness. There's virtually no support in the public school system for a child with mental illness. We do call it the invisible illness for a reason, because people, teachers, the community look at a child with a mental illness who does not have any physical disability or no physical changes due to their disability. And their expectation is that that child is going to be a mirror of them and what their abilities are, which is totally wrong, as science has proven time and again. So just wanted to mention that. Yes, Ms. Davis. Yes. Yes. And that's the piece that is missing in your public school system. And you're right. Anxiety, depression, a lot of other things go along with any disability that gets unaddressed.
What you said is right. Part of what was different, I mean, in the Florida school systems, I really got to grow and there was a lot more inclusion. But the reason why my mom wanted to move me, my sister and I up here in North Carolina is because, I mean, back in Florida, I was really most included and there were really great people to help me, but I could not graduate with my diploma. So the schools, so Leesville was very good, but up there I really didn't, without prejudice, I really didn't get to grow as much because the school I went to was not very inclusive. I mean, I did want to take some higher ed classes, but they were not very supportive. The only classes outside the program I were allowed to take were real basic home ec courses, and it wasn't like you got to take a higher level if you wanted to. It just all had to be basically a repeat of what you would already take.
Mm-hmm. So one individualized, really.
Correct, it really wasn't.
Right.
And something I would add about transition, just from a little bit different vantage point, is, and I hear this from families a lot, sort of on the other side of transition, and that is just recognizing that it's families' transition too. It's not only the child's
Yes.
transition, and being able to switch roles, and particularly after families have had to advocate so hard and worse, and they're in this advocate mode. So at transition time, they're really switching from being an advocate to more of an advisor, because that's how young adults are supported, and that's how we as young adults were able to start making decisions on our own and take risks and have that sense of independence. That's not to say, oh, the family needs to step away. No, but shift so that it's a supportive role that a family member starts to play. And that's tricky. It's tricky, especially when the focus is on the child, on this young person. But it's that balance, it's that family system that's really shifting, not just the child.
And sometimes it's hard to make that transition as a family, and
Yeah.
sometimes families give up. So that's one of the reasons it's so important to work on a transition plan. So there's something called family burnout, and it's very real. So we need to support the family as much as we're supporting the consumer of the services.
Many of you have mentioned supporting families and caregivers. And you work with programs that do that. What are some of the most beneficial things that people who work with families or work with youth can do to support families? And what are some of the long-term benefits of that?
Validation and empowerment for the lived experience.
I think teaching our families skills, feel like one of the best ways to ensure that their child is involved in the process is to help them develop their self-determination. So teaching skills around decision making, goal setting and attainment, problem solving, fostering a sense of responsibility, furthering their independence. All those are really critical skills that an individual with a disability needs. And there's some very specific strategies and approaches that can be used to help promote those skills in their child.
Also doing post-secondary education programs. If you go in and you have disability, they're not just gonna leave you stranded to vent for yourself and be in danger. Part of what I had to do in the UP program is when you first went there, you would have a lot of supports and volunteers, but as you proved that you could be more independent and find your way to your classes, then supports would fade off. So that is like how you would get to earn your independence. And part of what I got to do my second semester is I participated in a research study on how to make the campus more inclusive. And before then, basically had to plan everything 2 weeks in advance. So I advocated through my pictures and by writing down stuff that I did is that not everyone plans things 2 weeks in advance. And so there's to be more, flexibility in accessible systems.
So many of you work with programs that help families transition to post-secondary options. What are some of the best approaches you've seen to beginning this conversation with youth? And how do you address certain concerns parents may have, such as safety or along those lines?
I like what Keneth said just now. I think that fits very well. That's a big question.
I have a thought just based on some of the things that have just been said. And it seems to me that there are often two parallel things going on. One is this transition plan, and then there's the fact that there's a child that some parents are trying to raise into an adult. And I think some of the things that you said, Susan, with these skills that have to be taught in terms of that don't necessarily have to do with the school plan as outlined specifically in terms of checking off boxes, but have everything to do in skills that are required to become a functioning adult. And so I wonder if you have a typically developing child, then that's a dynamic that everyone's used to. And so it's not something that people are conscious of having to support. So in a situation with a child with disabilities, then the parents and the family have to be aware of that difference and work on that. And rather than taking all this focus on this exterior plan and all the things that aren't going to happen and all this disappointment, you have to kind of come back to where the child or the young adult is. And if that has sort of become incorporated, then these steps hopefully will become more apparent as to when it would be a time that you could step back and allow more risk in a safer situation, because risk is just a part of life. So no one can ever be, you can never be assured that it's going to be safe, but yet you have to back up and let someone who you've spent your life advocating for step out and risk it. So that was a thought.
That's a hard place for a parent.
I can't imagine.
And I'll give you an example. My son, whose birthday is today, he's 27, He was 7 years old when we adopted him and always had extreme emotional behavioral issues, no coping skills. And as a result of that, he was suicidal most of the time. He became hospitalized the first time at age 11, and from age 11 until this past July, he's lived most of his life in and out of hospital settings and different types of psychiatric facilities to help support him and teach him those coping skills that he needs to lessen the stress and to not feel like the only way to cope with someone telling me no is to kill myself. And that's where we were with him. And as of this past July, we were able to transition him out of adult group home living into the community. He's sharing an apartment with my youngest son. Now we set up our own little ACT team, assertive community treatment team. We live in the same apartment complex, a few buildings away. So mom and dad are there to help monitor medication management and do the daily check-ins. But it works for my family. It's very individualized. It may not work for your family. But we wanted to make those safety precautions, put those in place so he would feel safe and secure and supported while he's getting used to living in the community. So you got to get creative too. You can't just, like you were talking, McCaffrey, about the traditional neurotypically developing child. You don't have to really stop and think about those things. But when you have a child who has a special need, you've got to really be creative and think outside the box. Yes, Barbara.
But one of the hats I wear is I'm a psychologist in our practice, and I used to be a psychologist. And so I have a couple little bumps that I'm seeing families come up against. I think it would be great to have this. I believe in transition and planning transition, and I believe I was in the Post-Secondary Education Alliance that first year, which was the last year of my internship at UNC, so firm believer. So some of the issues I come across with various people that I'm trying to help are issues like OCS is only 4 years, and even though we have like this tremendous emotional lability and not ready to go move on beyond high school, we're having to make this transition suddenly. Vocational rehab, no one initiating voc rehab, realizing that the parents are just going to have to initiate voc rehab really early. Then also the parents are having to initiate the PCP process and the community planning. And then sometimes that is really slow. And the plans, I've really had to get involved in quite a few of these cases to try to get the plans not based on just a couple little things, but really planning for going to college to one of these, like beyond academic programs, where you have to have extensive, a really extensive transition plan. So I see a lot being put on the parents. And I see that like a discoordination in some of the school systems, knowing that school systems are trying to do their best. And it was a hodgepodge of stuff. I just wanted to see what responses you guys might have to that regard. Thank you.
I guess I'm in an enviable role in that I work for the Chapel Hill Carborough City Schools. I work at East Chapel Hill High School. I have significant support from my principal. I have a wonderful collegial relationship with my colleagues. And there's an understanding that we all work in partnership, and that to ease the burden and ease the feelings of being totally overwhelmed, by this whole maze of um, services and programs and resources and just the difficulties that come about as we start to explore options and opportunities. I think that communication and collaboration are really significant elements and essential in this process. And I can only speak for myself and what I do. But we work on a transition plan early on in their school experience. I have explored different options with families in visiting different places and gathering information, because that information piece is so important, and helping families think in different ways about how their child's needs can be met. We do a vision plan as to what a typical day is going to look like once their child leaves school and what resources are out there to help fill in. There is something that I don't have control over, and that's funding sources for what's going to happen after high school. Many of you may be familiar with the innovations waiver. In the old vernacular, in the old world, it was CAP services. And many of our families do not have the waiver. And that takes even more creativity then to figure out what to do. I really also think of the importance of nurturing natural supports. I've had some really remarkable, almost magical experiences with my community. My mantra is the community is where it's at for our students. And as a school system, as a school program, we need to nurture our community for our students as early as possible, because that's where they're going. I've had some experiences with employers. We have an approach called community-based vocational training. Came as a result of a dear colleague letter, a relationship that the Department of Education and the Department of Labor came together to develop, and that was to create vocational training opportunities in different business settings for our students to do authentic work experiences. And that's where we really see our students blossom. It's really that clean slate. It's really where they can be themselves and really show their potential. So they're showing their potential and others are seeing them. So that exposure is really important, getting our students out into the community and getting that exposure. Everyone is experiencing something very important and very positive. The student is experiencing a chance to explore their own strengths and abilities and skills, to learn about different work environments, to develop positive work habits and behaviors. Employers are seeing them and saying, wow, this individual is really providing value. And I bring them in to be part of that process. They're there to not only help us identify specific work activities so that our students can have these authentic work experiences, but they're there too to see my students and to see their value and to see what they can do, which is remarkable. It's transformative. I have many stories to tell, and I'm going to be really careful because I can go on and on about some of my stories, and I'm trying to exert some self-control here because I have a lot of excitement about what I do, and I have a lot of excitement about transition, and I can bring everyone in to be part of that excitement, and we can make things happen.
Has there been any, maybe you've done this, has there been any thought to like a model program for the state, or has the Secretary of Education Alliance taken a step down, or is someone initiating something at the high school level to coordinate some of these great ideas? People like you that have this great passion and are pulling it all together, because I work with people from a lot of different.
Yeah. There is an initiative right now with the Department of Public Instruction to ensure that there is consistency in the transition programs from school district to school district and school to school. So there is an effort to start looking at that.
Susan, can you talk a little bit? I'm sorry, we're having a mic issue. which happens a lot. Thank God I have a big mouth. Can you talk a little bit about the program that you're doing with East Chapel Hill High School and UNC?
Yes.
I think that is a good example.
I was going to bring that up. Yes. For years now, I've been part of a committee to really look at the needs of our students who stay till the age of 22. And I'm going to start there, but I'm going to come back to that. We looked at some model programs. There's one called Project Search. I don't know, some of you may be familiar with Project Search. We looked at that. We realized that we had to have a number of different partnerships, and we weren't sure that that was really going to come together for us for a lot of different reasons. And finally, we all just said, well, why don't we create our own Project Search? And it's called Project Achieve for Transitioning High School Students Paths. And we were able to get a door open for us with the University of North Carolina here in Chapel Hill to partner with the district through an MOU to create a program on campus. And it's really, I'm calling it a transition immersion because we have intensive vocational training and we also have a classroom on campus to help reinforce some of the skills that are developing through the vocational training. But we also look at life skills and partnering with different groups on campus and in our community to continue to help develop those skills. Accessing the community using public transportation, many other resources that are being tapped for our students in paths. We're hopeful, and I'm feeling some beyond hopefulness now, success, that we can begin bringing in some of our OCS students. However, it was a program that was designed for our students who have more significant disabilities, and those are the students who stay till 22. Yes, there is some rigidity around that 4 years for OCS students. You know, I have to be careful because I'm aligned with the school, and yet I sometimes think differently. So I really help our parents to be self-advocates and to push the limits because I think it can be done. And I have to be careful because I'm also part of the IEP team. But yet I see all kinds of possibilities that can be made if we can just think differently and do some things and manipulate some things that I think we can stay legal, but we can do them.
Yes.
So I want to encourage our families to be, and I will bring them in on this so that I help them lead the way by opening up doors. It can be done. I think a lot of different things can be done. We just can't let those doors close on us. You know, listening to our families is very important, and sometimes their ideas are really out there. I mean, I think, oh my goodness, I'll never use the word but. I'll say, okay, well, let's see what we can extract from this. Let's see what makes sense, what's really attainable within the limits we have, and then let's press and push the limits. So you know, parent power is underutilized, and that's my fundamental belief. Parent power is underutilized. So I'm going to leave that thought with you. And I'm going to stop talking. I don't want to overshadow or overwhelm here.
You know, I would just add that, you know, as we were saying, there's new and different opportunities, and I think that Project Search model is so exciting because it's really an internship opportunity. And when you think of what internship is, it's really hands-on experiential learning. And that's how these students learn best. You know, they're not abstract thinkers, they're concrete thinkers. So if you learn concretely, you want hands-on interactive kinds of learning opportunities. So it's really a wonderful fit. And you all want to Google Project Search, and it started in Cincinnati Children's Hospital. And these are real jobs that people are being trained for and making a living wage, and using some of the maybe some of the particular skills or traits that an individual might have. If someone has lots of attention to detail, then they might be doing a really detailed, like instrument sterilization job at a medical center. So it's been interesting to see how this has evolved. It's in 140 countries now, and then thinking of that model as you have to then create something that works for that particular group that you designed that for. So as these new opportunities are growing and being developed, we can borrow and learn and tweak and expand the range of opportunities, because I don't think there is a one size fits all. There's not going to be a single model. Just like the post-secondary opportunities in this state, every one of them is different. Now, many of the values and standards that they subscribe to are in common, but then the way the program looks and what it offers can vary a lot, just as every school is that way.
About natural sports at Western Carolina, there were natural sports in the classroom, so this way students don't fail. There could be someone who's sport from the UP program, or a student who was maybe say a criminal justice or poli-sci major in there to help you, and that is definitely, I think, could be really good in high schools too, because it's networking with the community, and this could help them meet other people, so this way they're not set up to fail in a high school class.
That structured like a mentor program?
Yeah, it's kind of like a mentor program where it could be a student who maybe does because they want to, or unless it could be honor students, where the teacher can maybe look who they think could be the best support.
We're going to move forward now to the next section, which is skill development. So this includes skills for independent living, education, employment, and various training programs. So I know many of you work directly with programs that teach various skills. Can you speak on what some of those skills are and their benefits?
Well, I was talking earlier about it, Josh's Hope. We run a vocational training program teaching young adults with a diagnosed mental illness or a dual diagnosis with substance abuse or maybe even another type of disability. Wonderful woodworking skills, and that makes them employable in the field of construction or fine carpentry or even artistry type of carpentry. One of the, well, there's several layers to the program. It's typically a 4-month program, but because of our flexibility, some students may finish in 3 months and some students might need a little over a year to finish. We've had students who've had to have a couple of hospitalizations during their time, and when they come home from the hospital and are ready to return, we welcome them back and they just pick up where they left off. One of the drawbacks we found in the program is because we cannot pay our students anything. Like when they are working, there's class time and they make things, but the things they make are part of a curriculum. And it's hard to get your student ratio up when most young adults are looking for walking around money. They want to buy cigarettes, they want to go to McDonald's, they want to go to the movies and stuff. And when you don't have money, it's hard to get students to come to a program where they need to be there 5 days a week, learning a skill, getting support, therapeutic support, learning independent life skills, because they want pocket change. And as a result of that, we've recently started a second company, and I guess it's called Steve and I just don't like sleeping or something, but we created a companion company called Contractors 911, and we also got vocational rehab funds to support this so that the students who are required to be in class 17 and a half hours a week of class time can also be employed through our Contractors 911 and get on-the-job training and internships, which builds their resume and portfolio and helps make them employable as they build their skills through actual on-the-job training and earning an income at the same time. So we've had to be very creative I love occupational courses study in our high schools. I've told Susan for years, I wish they had that for children with severe and persistent mental illness, but they don't, because it's a great program. And when students exit the programs, the transition facilitators like Susan really help the student and the families make a plan that works, but there's not that level of assistance for a child labeled with an SPMI. So Josh's Hope is sort of rare. It's unique to this community. It's actually unique to the state of North Carolina. And now we've got a second program to support it and let the students earn money and on-the-job training at the same time.
So I know many of you also work with programs that help transition into employment. So what are some challenges you've seen youth have, and what are some things that have helped them be successful in those environments?
It really depends on the individual. Most of my students require some level of support, at least initially, either through work adjustment services, and that's where vocational rehabilitation services can be of great help. I love VR. I come from a VR background, and I know what kinds of opportunities one can have through VR, but you have to advocate for yourself, and you have to really drive that. Yes, yeah. So for some students, they require that initial job coaching. For other students, require more intensive supports through supported employment, which is long-term support on the job via a job coach. It's really about job matching, and I think that's what leads to success. It's knowing your individual, your student, knowing their needs, knowing what their preferences are, their interests, how they learn, what kinds of systems of support they need to understand what their expectations of the job, providing the clarity as to what their work tasks are. It's also about finding the right environment. There are some amazing employers out there. I have put together just what employers have reported on as far as having individuals with disabilities in their workplace. They recognize that these employees with disabilities have unique and exceptional strengths and skills, that they're hardworking, they're dependable, they're conscientious, they contribute to a stable workforce, that they enhance the workforce climate, positively influence coworkers, that they promote a diversity within and outside of their organization, and that everyone experiences a sense of fulfillment and growth and pride in working for an environment in an organization rather that employs people with disabilities. It makes a difference for everyone. And so, but it's about finding a work culture that can really embrace the individual with a disability, because for those whose work supports fade as a result of the work adjustment, then those natural supports need to step in. And I've had a lot of experience working closely with employers to really understand the needs of my students to help them be successful and maximize the possibility for success. So it's working with the employers and understanding the student and finding the right job for them. And sometimes it involves restructuring, or in the old vernacular, job carving, to figure out what's a good match.
I like that word you use, culture, creating that culture.
I have an example with moving on to the job. I live in Winston-Salem, and we have the ICANN house in Winston-Salem. And ICANN, the premise of ICANN is to work with young people that have social differences. So most of the members there are autism, but it's not a requirement. They start basically age 8 through up. And the way that it's presented is you become a member at the ICANN house. And these kids come and they have different groups. Sometimes they go gather together and go out to eat. One time we met over there and a huge bunch of us walked over and went to the ball game. And so these kids that started out 8 years ago, 10 years ago at age 8 are now 18 and up. It has grown exponentially. It has increased. It does the double time thing of these kids are learning the social skills in real time by coming to the clubhouse, basically, and at the same time, learning how to interact in the community. The ICANN house is right downtown in the hipster part of Winston. It's very visible. As these kids, again, are now young adults, I have several examples of how ICANN House has partnered with the community to do just what you're talking about, with the BB&T Bank, with the movie theater in town, with a couple coffee shops, and have expanded into the community. So it's just a really good example of, while it's very specific, it's still, I think, an excellent example of very real-time community involvement that works on both sides.
Mm-hmm. So it's more like a natural transition for them.
Exactly, and it increases awareness in the community. It does all of these things sort of simultaneously in a really nice way.
Very intentional. That's great.
Well, some of the post-secondary opportunities are similar and that they're very visible. And I know, as you've mentioned, Keneth, when you're going to school alongside of like future employers, future community leaders, future neighbors, that everybody is working together. And as you were saying too, so that's how people become more. Communities become more accepting and more inclusive, and seeing more the skills and the strengths and the interests that people are bringing, rather than the deficits being the first thing or some kind of skill need as being the first thing. So the way, well, for example, and you can tell me if I'm off here, but like at Western, at the University Participant Program, so you start by choosing your career path, right? When you first start?
Yes, you start and then you can take the classes of your interest that you think will help, but they can help you too. Your first couple of semesters, you're actually on the campus. Then your senior, they want you to get a job that's off campus. And what they would do after you graduate is they would make a video resume that would show examples of you working in real time, and also the employers, whether it be the boss sources, anyone could really speak on there to how they felt about you as an employee.
So I'm thinking of, for example, a young woman who had always wanted to work with young kids. So she wanted to work in like the preschool. So part of her campus work study, I guess it was, right?
Yes.
What that would have been. So she was working there in the campus preschool. Now, this young woman didn't read herself. So she had like a computer activated story time that she would sit with a young child and they would do the story together. Then the courses that she chose, she was in a child development course. And so she had her education coach working with her. And yeah, maybe she's not learning 100% of what's taught. She's learning 40%. That is helping her in her position. And then she went on to do a community placement at a preschool or daycare, I think. Daycare. And then, so she completed her 2 years, and that was a couple years ago. And she got a part-time job at a daycare in Asheville. So that's the progression, that there's the choice. And I think, well, I always like that acronym, PINS, preference, interest, needs, strength. So needs is only like one part of it. Preference is first because, I mean, our motivation, our passion is about what we want to do rather than like where we were kind of placed to do. So I think, doing that reframe, as many of these programs are doing, is what really helps then someone to be successful and to maybe undertake learning some skills that previously didn't make much sense, or, they'd done math worksheets and that didn't make much sense. But when it applied to a particular task and a job that you were learning, then there was, well, it comes back to the concrete reason, right? Then it's no longer some abstract skill. It makes sense. So that would be the approach, say, at Western Carolina and also App State. Beyond Academics is a little bit different, but it's similar. Then some of the community college approaches. So, for example, I really like what Alamance is doing. They have career college, and they've developed a program. Well, and the way they developed this is really interesting. Rather than just come up with some career paths, Monica Isbell, who created the program, went to local businesses to find out, okay, where is there an industry here that has a need that we can train some people so there would be a job once they completed that. So they started off with like healthcare assistant. So this would be for someone who couldn't really achieve the a CNA, certified nursing assistant, but who's got a lot of skills and can learn and can be very competent. So they've got the healthcare assistant, they've got automotive assistant, and most of the learning takes place right in like in the garage at the auto repair shop, and the instructor is there. So again, it's hands-on concrete learning. They've recently started, I believe, landscaping and culinary arts, right?
Nursery greenhouse.
Nursery greenhouse, yeah. Yeah, so, and there's a similar career college in like Randolph County, and so some other community colleges that are starting to do some innovative things.
When you talk about preferences for business, and someone earlier mentioned about cookie-cutter approaches, my plea to families and professionals is that you expose students as really as possible, as often as possible, to a wide range of things. Because a lot of our students and our children are not able to think abstractly about something they've not experienced.
Right.
So someone with high cognitive abilities, they can tell you, find a way to tell you, I like to, I want to explore that. But if you haven't been exposed to something, how do you really know if it suits you? Or one can infer by one's positive behaviors that you are thriving in that environment, in that job skill set. So that's something I think is very important to keep exposing kids to. My son's experience has been very narrow exposure. And any breadth of exposure he's had has been my efforts. I'm one of those parents, sorry. And I went out and did it with my own financial resources. But I don't have Susan. So unless you're lucky to start if you live in this district. But if you don't, you're going to have to do that yourself. Find an opportunity to insert your student into many things and say, what were the outcomes of that? What does that mean to you? Do you like that? And you observe that their affect and everything is positive.
I want to tell you too that at Josh's Hope, there's 2 workshops we try to do every year, and one of them is futures planning, which is an all-day training for parents and young adults. And it takes you through a course that's used nationally on how to talk to your child to get them to engage in thinking about their future. And then it takes you through practices. So you'll hear more about that if you're, when I get the information, I'll send it to Barbara and Tamara, and they can send it to you. And the other one is on Legal Guardianship 101, which we really have not talked about in here. State of North Carolina, thanks to Barbara and Tamara, have really been talking about rethinking legal guardianship for the past year, working with the Department of Aging. And I think that we're going to see some changes emerge over the next few years as a result of their think tank work group on this. Yes.
I'm so glad somebody brought that up. A statewide initiative sponsored by the North Carolina Council on Development Disabilities and the Division of Aging, looking at adult to live a quality, supported life as independently as possible for you. And we are looking at that across the ages from 18 to the end.
100.
What is quality life for individuals? What does it look like? And what we've heard a lot is very individualized.
Very.
So if you have an interest in guardianship and what transitions can look like for adults, and you're interested in the rethinking guardianship workshop, we need parents and family members and self-advocates to be a part of making those decisions and talking about those options so we can make a difference.
So our second workshop is Legal Guardianship 101 that we do, and it's going to be in April this year. I don't know the date off the top of my head, but Barbara and Tamara, I'll send you the flyer and you can distribute it. And under the Legal Guardianship 101, we work with a local family law attorney who actually is a DSS attorney and running for judgeship in District 15B right now. But she explores the whole issue of legal guardianship and why would a parent or caregiver need to even consider legal guardianship, and answers your questions. My husband and I have legal guardianship of our 2 adult children, and the reason we went that route, when Josh was turning 18, our case manager said, do you want to get legal guardianship of Josh when he turns 18? And our answer was, well, why would we need to do that? I mean, he's working as a bagger at Harris Teeter. We're trying to help him be as independent as possible and teach him how to make better decisions for himself. So why would we need that? And her answer was, well, I don't really know. Maybe her only thing was that she could say is, well, maybe for financial reasons. I said, but he's doing pretty good managing his money. So she couldn't answer the question. After Josh's death, we realized why we needed legal guardianship, and it was because on his birthday, his 18th birthday, we had lived from age 8 to age 18 for 10 years of being in treatment team meetings about his care and his needs and answering questions in depth and truthfully, and informed about the types of medications, the types of behavior. I mean, our kids, and I will tell you, out of the hundreds of families I've worked with the past 16 years, many of our kids, probably most of them, if you say to them, well, how's that medication working for you? They're going to say, fine. They're not going to talk about the sleepless nights or the restlessness or the fidgeting or the falling asleep in class. And it's not something that they would think of. So I got to tell you, when they turn 18, they're still thinking that way. They're not going to be able to answer those questions directly. And as the body gets bigger, your body chemistry changes, your brain chemistry changes through all of the brain developmental stages. And medication might need to change. It usually does. Diagnoses often change at age 18, between 18 and 20. So we have legal guardianship of our kids, not because we want control of their lives. We absolutely have no control over their lives. We let them make all of their decisions. We have legal guardianship specifically to stay in the treatment team loop, because for our son Josh, we were told, he's 18, you cannot come in here anymore. We're not going to answer your questions. If he wants you to know, he'll tell you. But because in all of his arm's length of diagnoses, he also had a processing disorder. He didn't understand what was said. He couldn't explain to us what they talked about regarding medication, and he didn't know what questions to ask. But now, as legal guardians for Jacob and Isaac, we are actually part of the treatment team. We sit down and we talk about medications. We talk about what works, what doesn't work. We're able to identify any physical ailments or anomalies that are going on. And that's the only reason we have it. one of the reasons I really loved it when Barbara and Tamara said they were putting together this rethinking legal guardianship, it's like, I don't really want legal guardianship of my kids, but what's the alternative? It's almost like an all or nothing thing. And we've made it work creatively for ourselves by not interfering with our kids' lives and sticking with it and managing their money, because they would overdraw every single week if we didn't manage their money. But we have them on an allowance, and they manage their money through allowance, dishing out allowances to them, and being there for the treatment team process. So you've got to do what works for your family and not try to mirror, like my family. What we do may not work for you, but just be creative. My That is a wonderful question, and I really appreciate you asking that, because when we approached this, we really thought they would both fight it. At the time, Jacob was institutionalized, so it was a very easy decision. The Clerk of Superior Court had no problem with it. Isaac was not, and yet he was sort of like, well, I don't even know what questions to ask in the doctor's office, so, as long as you live up to your promise, And I'll tell you, when you go through the process, your child has a court-appointed guardian ad litem, so the guardian's there to represent the best interest of the person who's you're trying to have legal guardianship of. And they question them a lot. And both of my kids says, we don't care. Well, I don't think life is going to change very much for us. And now today, because I think we have saved them from losing their services, they both have SSI. And with all of the changes in the federal and state government, there is a big push to cut these services. And, a few years ago, we went through the changes within the group home living situation, and Jacob was in a group home. They tried to get rid of his personal care service hours, which would have meant it wouldn't pay for him living in a group home anymore. But the state did a sneaky thing. And I'm sorry I'm taking up so much time, but I think this is important for you to know. They sent interviewers around to the group homes and interviewed the consumer, and they started sending out rejection letters to families saying your child's benefits have been denied. If you want to appeal, you have 60 days to appeal. And we would appeal, and because my husband had legal guardianship, he says to the interviewer, you don't have the legal right to sit down with my child without me being present. So that's another benefit for us that played in. And we were able to get services reinstated because the state did not acknowledge us as legal guardians. They tried to cut off services. Questions that were asked on the interview form, the interviewer just asked for a yes or a no answer. And when they did the re-interview and my husband was there, and they would let Jacob answer first, and he would say, yeah, I can do that. Jacob would say, let me interject. Steve would say, let me interject. And Steve would reframe the question so Jacob understood what they were really asking. And Jacob would say, well, no, I can't do that. I can't do that, no. And we have been able to save their services by being their legal guardians. They both say to us now, thank you for being there, because we could not fill out that paperwork. We don't understand it. We don't understand the questions being asked. And for both of them, literally, their services would have been denied. It would have been cut instantly. And I'm telling you, they'd be homeless today if it weren't for sticking it with them as legal guardians.
I love that you've done that. My concern, or my question now is, like right now they're safe, but what happens when you and your husband are gone? Who becomes their guardian?
This is a really on top of it.
I know it's a scary thought, because right now, if something were to happen to you guys, tonight or this weekend, you go out on a date, you both get hit by a drunk driver. Do they end up wards of the state?
No. If a legal guardian dies, then that ends the legal guardianship, unless another family member wants to step in and apply for legal guardianship. Now, what you do to protect yourself in that situation, what my husband and I have done, we've set up a trust for our children, and we've named their aunt, one of their aunts, as the step-in legal guardian. But that does not mean that the clerk of Superior Court has to adhere to what's in that. I mean, they could pick somebody else, but at least the court is aware they have a legal guardian. And if we die, that there's a trust in place and someone else is the trustee, and that we want those services changed over. This is not fair.
No, I just wanted to add to what Barbara had said in terms of the rethinking guardianship. Part of what we're wanting to do is to increase awareness of the alternatives to guardianship. So Julie's just been talking about how, in her particular experience, guardianship, was very helpful. But there are alternative, and I'm sorry this mic really is not working well. There are a number of alternatives to legal guardianship that are less restrictive for the individual. Some of those include things you're familiar with, like power of attorney, or fiduciary agents, where an individual just needs help making decisions or managing their money, for example. So there are any number of possibilities that parents could pursue along with their child that don't remove all the legal rights that guardianship does. And one of those important alternatives that's really coming to the fore these days, and I'm going to speak without this because I think it's is a new model called supported decision making.
Yes.
And that is that essentially is a circle of support for an individual with disabilities that are individuals that they trust in their life who can help them to make very important life decisions. So this really is a model that maximizes the independence and self-determination of the individual. They select the individuals who are going to officially be their advisors. It's consistent with the way that any of us, when we make important decisions in our lives, do that, in that we often ask experts in our lives, family members, financial advisors, attorneys, what have you, to help us make informed decisions. So this is a model that is really taking off across the country, and one of those alternatives that we hope to make people more aware of. But this is really an important issue around transition, because as some of our panelists have talked about, the experience that many families have is upon their child turning 18 in the school system, that someone will come to them and say, you really must get legal guardianship for your child. And we're just encouraging people within the school system, families, people who are providers, clerk support for those who act as judges in guardianship cases, that they are aware that there are these other alternatives that are less legally restrictive. And so part of what we're wanting to do is get the word out about those. And importantly, I think, to the school system. And Susan, that was a question I wanted to ask to you at some point about, to what extent do you think educators are aware of those alternatives? Because in our experience, oftentimes parents are told from the school system that almost as an automatic thing that you need to go out and get guardianship. So we can maybe save that response for the question and answer period at the end. I think we're wanting to move on to the final section.
And I just have one comment. You mentioned power of attorney, and I want everybody here to understand that a power of attorney is verbally revocable. We had a power of attorney with our son Josh, and during hospitalization, he got angry with us because we had to have him involuntarily committed. So he verbally withdrew his power of attorney, and we were instantly, again, cut out of the treatment decision process. Yes. Yes. No, they don't. And you just made me think too, Dara. We started out with full guardianship, and we've, over the years, have reduced it to limited. So a lot of people think once you have full, you're stuck with full. You are not. Yes, yes, and that's our goal, is to get them to that point where they are successful in making good decisions and understand their treatment process, and we don't have to do that anymore.
So we're going to move on now to talking about self-advocacy. I know Deb works with CIDD and self-advocacy initiatives, and Kenneth and McCafferty are self-advocates themselves. So could you speak on the importance of self-advocacy and what one can do to become a strong self-advocate?
Yes, I would definitely have to say by
Pull your microphone closer.
yes, definitely by encouraging them to be independent and to let them take risk. Risks that are not too dangerous, but like maybe by making a mistake in the classroom and not punishing them so harshly, since oftentimes the case, and letting them be involved in their IEP meetings, letting them I know some schools kind of prepare a child before the IEP meeting to write down what are some things you want to work on and what do you maybe need less of. So by letting them be more involved in their IEP meetings and put them in inclusive settings.
I think when we talk about self-advocacy, so we're saying speaking up for yourself, right? And I think that, as many of us were saying earlier, people who are concrete thinkers sometimes maybe need help in understanding when is a question about your preference. What's the difference between when I say, what is 2 + 2, and I say, what do you want to be when you grow up? I mean, if we're really thinking along the lines of if these are subtleties to me, then I need to have a better understanding also of when is it a good thing that I'm compliant, because compliance is often a positive thing. A lot of times you don't want somebody to be compliant. And I think that goes back to what we were saying earlier about safety concerns. So this is all involved with feeling that I have the right to express my preferences, to have opinions, to have to have my own way of doing something, and that is an expectation that I have for the rest of my life, and that then we're getting into the self-determination, so I'm making these big decisions, big life decisions. But we can't really start making our big life decisions if we haven't had the experience of making like the small decisions, what am I going to wear today? And I think from a young age, that attitude, because to me, the specifics of how do you speak up for yourself, that's secondary to that perspective and that perception and that expectation that I get to have those opinions. And the other thing that comes to mind related to what we were just talking about too is around healthcare management, so that a young child starts getting a sense of, why do I have this medication and how often? And as soon as the child is able to start being more in charge of taking medications or being able to describe a particular diagnosis, so that they are also looking to transition to an adult healthcare provider. And this is all, big stuff. And multiple things that have to happen. There's a great website called Got Transition, and it's all about healthcare transition. And but being able to manage ones or have a greater sense of control over my own healthcare is just another facet of that sense of self-advocacy.
And I think the fact that we are talking about the importance of self-advocacy, on one hand, oh my gosh, it's one of the most important things. And then on the other hand, it seems absurd that we even have to have the conversation that that's an important thing. because every person in this room, I would bet, takes it for granted that they need to speak up, that if they want something, the best way to get something is to speak up for it. That's just, it's one of those things that seems to be a given in a typically developing situation. But if you've got an atypical situation where other things have to be considered, where all these decisions are being made externally and no one's asking, and more importantly, no one's listening, how is that skill even, how is someone to know one doesn't even have that skill? So this is something that on such a basic level, I mean, self-advocacy, I could talk about those words for an hour now because we've discussed this a lot at Lind and what that term means here, what that term means the population at large, what do I mean when I say that in terms of myself, all these things that can be broken down, but when it comes down to its very basic meaning, it means a person says what they need or what they want, and other people listen to that and take it into consideration. That's just a basis of communication. So that can't be cut out with these kids either, and it can't be considered from a typical group, can't not consider that. I mean, no one would even think that a possibility in any other situation I could think of. So I kind of lost my point, but that was
That's a great point. It's sort of like cultural diversity, thinking along the culture where we absorb ourselves into it and we shouldn't have to be. We're just recognizing your rights and not your rights or my rights, but rights in general. And we all have these rights to make these decisions for ourselves.
And perhaps, and I can say this from personal experience, even though I didn't grow up with these programs, it has taken me many, many, many years to figure out the different response I get from saying what I would like. So there are different factors that I'm talking about here, and I am aware of that, and I don't ever mean for anything to sound simplistic. But parents have to be aware of that importance because it might not be obvious. There's these things again with what's obvious and what's not, and how things can't be taken for granted. And so many factors come in.
I think we can really promote self-advocacy through helping our students learn about themselves. So that self-awareness, that self-knowledge is really foundational to helping them further their self-advocacy skills, knowing what they want and what they like and what brings them good feelings and what brings them not so good feelings, and then having some experiences, really building in experiences, gaining that, having that opportunity to have an exposure to different opportunities and activities, and it really they need that to get to that point of self-awareness. It's really a basic.
And I think self-awareness is huge for the population in general. Everyone would be better served if they had more self-awareness. And this sort of reality of, oh, here's this thing that I might do. I'm talking about anyone. And I might not like to do that thing, so I'm not going to do it. That's not helpful. Anything, even if it's like, well, this really sucks, I'm not going to do it again. But see, now you know that.
Right.
So I think this comes back to that exposure. And I think it's hard to expect of anyone to really know how to answer questions or talk about a situation that really means nothing.
think a lot gets justified under this wanting to be protective of people. And so that's like, oh, anything is okay because we're protecting. But like, as you were saying, Kenneth, being able to take risks, that's what enriches people's experience and lets them learn and grow to their ability and their interest.
Yes, and that's, again, towards will stop ignorance is by acceptance and inclusion of all people, not we're going to put them in this sheltered area.
Mhm. And I could say too, with from my situation, it's one of my goals is to be completely and totally independent. I'm not. Now, I'm telling you this so that you will know, so that you understand that for me, I see this as a process. And perhaps I am behind my peers if we're going to use that as a measure, but that doesn't mean that I don't think that it's possible and that I'm not still making progress.
All because you're still growing as a person.
Mhm. And I'm still learning and I'm still pushing myself and I'm still doing things that are very hard.
I can remember when my youngest was in elementary school and he would not let us do the lunchtime medication dose for him because he didn't want anybody watching him leave the classroom, because we know every time somebody leaves the classroom, they have to go take a pill, and I don't want people in my business. And then one day he came home and he said, oh, Johnny goes to take his pill, so I'm cool with going to take my pill now. So that sometimes that's measured, that awareness comes through something they've observed from a peer. And now here he is 24 and Jacob's 27, and they are calling in refills for their medication. They are using the weekly doser boxes, and they put out, we keep them at our apartment, and we make sure that they're getting them twice a day. That's our ACT team model. But they're doing it themselves, and they when we go out of town, I know you all think this is silly, I'm sure, but it works for my family. We have them take a picture of each other or just text us and say, I took my pills, when they take their pills, so we're assured that they took them, because part of their disability is really short-term memory and they don't remember to take them. And being aware of their behaviors, so they know when they're feeling a certain mood. This could be a manic cycle approaching, or this could be a depressive cycle approaching, and being able to verbalize that without judging themselves, because I think my kids judge themselves harsher than any of us would.
Well, I think too, though, that story that you told about the school and seeing the other kid, I think to me that seems like a perfect example of how inclusion leads to natural supports.
Yes.
Because people, everyone seems to me, tends to give people motives that may or may not be there. So your kid, by seeing that and being in that, was able to realize that he was ascribing this motive that wasn't there, and he changed his behavior.
Yes.
And I think that right there is
Success.
an important thing. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Now,
There's a couple of people out there have been waiting.
Yes. What would it look like if everybody in this room made it their life work to improve the quality of their life and their neighbor's life? What would we have?
Next question.
things like adequate food, adequate sources, improves health, so it all goes together. The one thing that struck me, most people don't talk about space about it, is how much you guys have said, we can't make 100% safe, we're gonna have to let our youth be exposed to risk, and we're gonna have to make that happen. We need that. And as PDs particularly, how do we happen? How do I get the pediatricians to realize we can't make 100% safe after the moment? Is there anything you guys do that's going to change that?
Well, we talked earlier about this supportive decision making. And Kenneth talked about, this sort of, you made a lot of your risks were taken in a supported environment where it was a risk and someone was making sure you were safe at the same time, but you got to have that experience.
Yes, I definitely would have that. There would always be those students in there that would support me, and of course the teacher would know about my disability, so there will always be that knowledge and awareness I might need extra help, but they included me.
I think the Ped Society, educating them, I mean, finding ways to, provide CME programs. I mean, that's one just very concrete, obvious way to get the word out. Got Transition has tools and checklists and approaches for all different. Right.
I think that's a macro issue that we're not going to solve here.
You're going out there now. You're going to be an MD. I want you to remember what you learned during the night and all the things that ran into you about.
And this is why our multidisciplinary training is, that's why we do this, so that the, OTs and PTs and pediatricians, which we don't have on this year, but we have, and social workers, so that everyone goes out there with this understanding.
And that's what I wanted to say is, and this doesn't really help you perhaps, but this is just, as I've been sitting up here and listening to this, and I see this loop happening, and I hear the talk about with the experience of the parents, and I hear about the education and the program, and I hear Keneth, and I've learned so much from his experience, and now I'm working with Deb and at the CIDD, and I see what the LIN program is doing, and it's different levels of what LIN is doing. One, LIN is a graduate level opportunity for someone with an IDD, which is involved. And then, but what I see is even more, not more important, but the bigger part of that picture is that by including self-advocates as the member of this cohort, all of who have expressed an interest to work with children and families with special needs, that's how they came to be selected for LIN, is that they have that interest. By making this an inclusive setting, every day of the semester, they are thinking of everything differently. Just like you said, it's like, oh, there's this what we learned, and then there's this reality, and how are they going to bridge? So these people that graduate in all of these different disciplines and go back into the community, whether they're working with a parent who they're given a diagnosis, or they're working with a kid who's growing up, or they're working with the school, they now have a whole different way of looking at this situation. And that's really big picture, but I think that's really the amazing thing of what the LIN program is doing.
So we're running short on time, so we could take about 1 to 2 more questions.
program or certification. So it's kind of, we've only been around for a year and a half, so we're pretty new. So most people probably don't know about us yet. But it's pretty incredible. Yeah, so I can talk more after. I just wanted to let you know that we're here.
Good.
Thank you.
Welcome. Barbara?
Yeah, there's studies on that. Yeah, yeah. If you write your name on the, well, I have your contact info, but I can send out, yeah, some articles that have been,
Even
yeah,
Google
it's
that.
documented.
Exactly the way you put it.
So we're going to take one more question.
So this goes back to some of the topics we covered earlier. I'm a program specialist at our rural North Carolina school district, Franklin County. We've got 3 high schools in very rural settings like Bond, Franklinton. And prior to this job, I was also the occupational study teacher. So our problem, and this is probably more is that we are able to secure local businesses for that off-campus work study training, but we're finding even after graduation, with support of both rehab, these kids, or students, adults rather, are having difficulty finding paid employment in the community. And with us being such a rural setting, transportation is an issue. We don't have any free transportation in Franklin County. And I didn't know if you had any advice on how we can really break down those barriers, just because that sort of seems to be where we hit a halt. So we've got wonderful support leading up to that point, and then it just breaks my heart when I see a student who graduated 2 years ago who still can't find employment.
Well, the best predictor as far as successful adult outcomes is actually paid employment before they leave high school. So if there can be some efforts in partnership with VR to develop paid employment opportunities, and one other potential possibility or a possibility is maybe looking at the paid internship program through VR. Had a couple of students do paid internships actually last summer, and that was very, very enlightening for them because we didn't have a job coach in those settings. They worked directly with one of the directors or supervisors or managers in those places, and so they were really treated as another employee, and that could potentially open up some doors for them. So paid internship, if you cannot find paid employment opportunities, maybe seeing if the employer would be willing to work with you in some way to do something really part-time, extracting some of the work activity that they can do. I understand that you have a very small employment culture there, but I would just work very closely with employers, help them understand what your goal is, and help them understand that before they leave high school, this is when they can really get the supports to be successful. Our students really need a lot of hand-holding. You know, despite our efforts to promote self-determination and help them set goals and make decisions and solve problems, especially early on, their confidence isn't there. And so we just have to take a real active role in helping them with their job developments and placement.
And I'll add to what Susan said. If you have a business in mind that you would like your caseload, your clients placed, approach them about applying to VR to become a vendor, either an internship or on the job training vendor, because they will pay 75% of that person's salary. In some cases, 100%. And in a rural area like Franklin, I bet you it would probably take them maybe 30 days to get a contract set up because they're starving for it there. So just go to the business and say, did you know that? Or sit down first with your local VR.
And if you have like a job link center, part of Employment Security Commission, they don't use that term anymore, but uh, working with them to approach employers with the targeted job tax credit may be also another way to open up a door. So are you going to be attending, sorry, this is off, but there's a conference next week that VR is putting on. I'll talk to you about it a little bit. That might be helpful to you.
It's also good to know about the Business Leadership Network, and there's a chapter of that in North Carolina. And that's coming from the business community, offering support to other businesses about how to be more welcoming and more supportive for hiring people with disabilities, with the full range of disability.
Maybe I have a closing comment. Not long ago, I saw a poster that was put out by the Gates Foundation that had some great infographics on it of the benefits to employers of hiring individuals with disabilities. So you might go to the Gates Foundation website.
Good idea.
Yeah, thank you.
So we're all out of time now, but I want to thank our panel members so much for coming and sharing their expertise and experience and being so open to speak with all of us. And thank you all so much for coming and taking the time to ask questions and listen and just be a part of this. If you haven't already, complete your evaluations and turn them into the table out front. These help us plan the seminar series for next year and know what's the best topics, things to improve on. Also, if anyone's interested, we have a seminar next month called Supporting Families to Improve Outcomes for Children, Building Family Resilience, which is another panel. So if you're free and interested, we'd love to have you. So we hope you have a wonderful day. And thank you all again so much for coming.
Guys.